Okay, Yom Rishon, today Sunday. It's Chavdalet Menachemov. You know that Chavdalet you say Hallel. You know that, right? Every Chodesh Chavdalet you say Hallel. In the Chitas today you say Hallel. So the Rebbe has a sikha. I always teach it. You're out of listen. We learned the Rebbe's kapitel. So the last 5 years we had kapitel from Hallel. So it always comes up. The Rebbe has a sikha where the Rebbe says that the Gemara says you're not allowed to say Hallel every day. Hallel b'chol yom. I think it's as a reizeh magadef. It's a terrible thing to say Hallel every day. Why? Because it neutralizes the phenomena of miracles. There's different levels in the Eibishter's world. You know, even though on the highest level there's achdus, but in our experience and in our lives and to a great extent in our reality, there's levels. There's teva and there's nes. There's what's natural and there's what's supernatural. There's what's ordinary, what's extraordinary. There's what's everyday. There's what happens on rare occasion. And if a person in his religiosity, in his frumkeit, neutralizes everything is Eibishter. It's true. But in the person's experience, he's not adding his dveikis and elokus. He's taking away that flaw of something which is supernatural. So you're not supposed to say Hallel every day. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to say Hallel when you have a reason to say Hallel. And we like I said, every year at Aleph Nissen we learn Hallel. I'm not giving you a class on Hallel. I'm just mentioning it. B'ashgacha pratis, because it's Chavdal b'chedesh. So the Rebbe said once, so how do you say Hallel in Chitas? Every 24th of the month you're holding Madreg of Hallel. And the truth of the matter is, how do you say Hallel Shabbos Mevarchim and all the other things? Every time you're saying Hallel, when it's not specifically for the purpose of Hallel, so the simple answer is, because you're not saying Hallel as a Hallel, you're saying Hallel as a part of Tilim, which is fine. But then the Rebbe goes the other way, and he says everything is B'ashgacha pratis. And if it works out that every Chodesh on the 24th day of the month you're saying Hallel, that's proof that every month on the 24th day of the month is in Yonim that justify the saying of Hallel. And the way I feel about it is that these 6 years, which started with Kuf Yud Gimel, Kuf Yud Dalel, Kuf Tezvav, Kuf Tezayin, Kuf Yud Zayin, Kuf Yud Ches, right? So there's 6 kapitals of Hallel. We already did 5 of them, which goes back to Tov Shinayin Gimel, whatever it is. Whenever you start, I don't know the numbers. Every day we say Hallel. If every day we say Hallel, was the raya that every day we have Shachas and Yonim of Nes. Because the Eibishter would not arrange that we should say Hallel unless saying Hallel was just. So there's a thought, and the Eibishter should help. We should see the Yonim from Nes Shalamayla Menatev in our lives. Now, let me say this. We haven't learned Tanya in 3 weeks. The last time we learned Tanya was mamash a month ago. It was Chavhei Tammuz. This morning I was preparing, and I was trying to figure out what happened to the last 3 Sundays. So, whatever, I took my kids to the zoo. We had Tisha B'Av, and I went to visit my kid in camp. That's what happened in the last 3 Sundays. Bottom line is, I haven't been here in a month. And I don't want to skip Tanya. I don't like to skip Tanya. I think Tanya is very important. Tanya is very, very much life itself. But when you have so many breaks, Tanya, it's like, how do you hang on to it? Tanya is edel. Tanya is deep. Now, we did 2 classes on Peirik Dalet. We had 2 classes on Peirik Dalet. And I think each class was separated by about a month. Because before that Sunday, there were a bunch of other excuses. Going back as far as Gimel Tammuz, we hadn't learned. Tanya's been very bumpy over the last Meshech Zman. Which means as we come to today's class, honestly, I'm not sure where I'm holding. I spent a lot of time listening to the Sunday class from 3 weeks ago. I'm still not sure what I should say today. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give you a brief overview and I'm going to move on. In other words, is it possible that I'm missing an aspect of Tanya that I would like to explain? Yeah, it's very possible. But I don't want to wait. I don't want to repeat myself, and I don't want to waste your time. And it's very difficult for me to remember after so many breaks. Wo mir halten Punkt. The basic point is that the Alter Rebbe presents us with a picture of the neshama, and we've spent a year on this, at least, because Peirik Gimel took forever. I don't know if you remember. Peirik Gimel was the shortest Peirik in Tanya. Was 20 classes, literally. because I brought in a lot of things which are not in the Tanya. I have no regrets. I did it on purpose. And I don't do this on every Pedic of Tanya. In Pedic Gimel, I did all the Esek Koiches, and I did the Chushim, if you remember. But the Alter Rebbe gives you a picture of the Neshama. And in short, he divides the Neshama into three. The inside, the middle, and the outside. Right? In Hasidic language, it's called the Roish, Toich, Seif. The head, the center, and the feet. And of course, the head is the connection of the Neshama to the Eibishter, which has two forms, there's two ways of describing the connection between the head and the Neshama. The first is Chelik Lekami Mal Mamish, which was yesterday's Hayem Yem. Right, yesterday's Hayem Yem was that the Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe when they learned Tanya together, Chelik Lekami Mal, Ruchnius Shabaruchnius, Mamish, Gashmius Shabagashmius. It was yesterday's Hayem Yem that the Rebbe Rashab was learning with the Frierdiker Rebbe Tanya. And he told him, when he came to the second Pedic, that when you're describing the Nefesh HaShenis, the second Neshama which a Jew has, it's Chelik Elokami Mal, there's nothing more spiritual than it, and Mamish, there's nothing more material than it. And then the Rebbe Rashab explained to him that that's the power of the Yiddish Neshama. You know, Milmaila, Maila, Adein Kates, Ad Lamata, Mata, Adein Tachas. It doesn't have any constraints. It is what it is in the highest worlds, and it continues to be what it is in the lowest and the darkest places. That's the whole power of the Neshama. That's the whole purpose of the Neshama. And that's the whole inyan of the Neshama. So Pedic Beis was this. Now I want to say something parenthetically. This is a Maimer Amuzger. It's a Geschmacker, it's a Fabrengen Stickel, if you will. It's not a Limud, but it's a Wort. You know, the Chitas was divided by the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Tanya Chitas was divided by the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he made it twice. He made it Tavshin Gimel to Tavshin Dalet, that means 1943 to 44, or whatever, 1943, which was a leap year, an Iber. When the Tanya, the Hayem Yem, came out for Tavshin Gimel. The years of the Hayem Yem is Tavshin Gimel, 1942. 1942 to 43, Ikir 43. And then the following year, Tadash, Tavshin Dalet, which the Frierdiker Rebbe used to call Tadash, a note from the Rebbe. They have the Rebbe's Hayem Yem, the printed Hayem Yem, with his notes on it. And when the Rebbe prepared the Hayem Yem, the Frierdiker Rebbe made corrections. And one of the corrections that the Frierdiker Rebbe made was that the Rebbe wrote that it's from Tavshin, it's a kiss of Tavshin Gimel to Tavshin Dalet. Tavshin Gimel, Tavshin Gimel, 400, 303. And then Tavshin Dalet, be 400, 300. The Frierdiker Rebbe crossed out Tavshin Dalet and wrote Tadash, Tav Dalet Shin. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe said, as with a Kumen the Zeit wird man verstehen. When the time will come, we'll understand why he's changing it from Tashad into Tadash. Okay, I don't know if obviously the Zeit was noch nicht gekommen because I've never heard from the Rebbe Hezbet. But noch wissen. But the Frierdiker Rebbe said, the time will come, you'll understand why I'm changing it. But the Rebbe made a lot of, Frierdiker Rebbe made a lot of noise. So the following year, Tavshin Dal, Tavshin Hey was a regular year, it wasn't a leap year. And the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe made again Chitas. Now parenthetically, and this is a parenthesis within a parenthesis, they once printed the handwritten Hayem Yem. They printed the Rebbe's own original Hayem Yem, not in the printed Sefer, which we have, but the handwritten Hayem Yem. And they printed the first page, and they printed the last page. And what you saw was, you see the Rebbe, our Rebbe's handwriting, right? Yom, Sheni, whatever it is, Yom Rishain, let's say for the sake of argument, Chav Dalad Menachem, Hey Tavshin Gimel, Shiyurim, Chumash, and the Rebbe wrote in, Re'ei, Tchilas HaParsha Til Sheni. Tilim, Kapitel Kufyut Gimel to Kufyut Ches. Tanya, and he left an empty space. And then you have the Piskam in the Rebbe's own handwriting. And you see clearly the Frierdiker Rebbe's Ksav. You understand? In other words, this is, you can physically see how when the Rebbe prepared the Hayem Yem, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote into the text each day the Chitas. You could see what your Fleishike Oiden, which is very exciting. Not that you need proof that the Rebbe told the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote it, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote it, but you see B'muchash how the Rebbe made Hayem Yem in his own hand, Ksav Yad Kedesh, and the Frierdiker Rebbe each day wrote in the Shir of Chitas and Tanya. And another Geschmack of art is at the very end of the Hayem Yem, the last Hayem Yem is Chai Kislev, Yitchas Kislev. And over there you have the Piskom from the Alter Rebbe, which is in Derech Mitzvah Secha. That the Tzemach Tzedek writes, Kacha hoyo nishma mepi azmur zal be'ez dveikusei. You know this, right? Midi b'shamayim v'imcha lechafasti ba'aretz. Ich will ze gornis, ich will dein Geneden, ich will den El Mabor. Ich will menitas dich allein. That's the Piskom of the last day, the Erev Rosh Hashanah. You'll see this. Yudches Kislev Tov Shin Dalet Hadash. And then underneath again you see in the Frierdiker Rebbe's hand, Good Yom Tov, Lashon Teva, B'limud HaChasidus, or Darkei HaChasidus, Tikaseimu V'Sechaseimu. The Frierdiker Rebbe added it. The Yemye comes out benign. But you can see in the Ksav, so I asked Michal Zolfin, he told me they lost it. How do you lose this is beyond me. But they have the Ksav Yad Kedek, that the original manuscript says, you know where it is. They printed a couple of pages, with 20 Finif Yad Tzrik, I said years ago. If I'd seen it yesterday, I would have forgotten what's written there. Yeah? But they lost it. The printed Hayem Yeh with the Rebbe's notes, the Rebbe gave Michal Zelix, I don't know if whatever it is. But the Rebbe they found in the Rebbe's house, the original. Anyway, I've gotten way off track. The point of Negea is that the Frierdiker Rebbe divided up the Shiurim. Chitas, the Tanya that the Rebbe made. Now, there's a clear difference between a regular year and a leap year in the Shurim of Chitas. If you have a look at the Shurim of Chitas, there's a clear pattern. I'm not going to say it goes through the whole year, but it certainly goes through most of the year. First of all, if you have a leap year, you have an extra 30 Shurim. You have to divide the Tanya into 30 more pieces. So every piece gets a little smaller, obviously, yeah? But it's much more violent, much more blunt than that. In the leap year Chitas, you'll have 6 very short shiurim, 6 short shiurim, and then 1 massive shiur. 6 short shiurim and a very long one. And in the original Tanya, the original Yom Yom, it was Shabbos. In Tov Shin Gimel, it was Shabbos. Now this year it can be Wednesday, it can be Monday, it can be Thursday, but in the original year it was Shabbos. So the Frierdiker, when he made the shiurim of the leap year, he made them very uneven. 6 short ones and a long one. 6 short one and a long one. 6 next year, we're going to start a leap year. Tovshin Ayin Tes, Tovshin Pei, Mitzvah Hashem, Larich Hashem Hashanim. Gesundheit, der Freilich, der Gula, Mitzvah, Vashlei, mit Eben, Nirvan, Nigla. Amen. Meheire Yigola. Was steht Lashon? Was Siris Yas HaMelech HaMashiach, Meheire Yigola, Amen, Ken Yirat. You'll see how the Shurim go.
But that makes sense.
It makes sense not practically, but b'pnimius hanya.
I mean,
It's not because of Shabbos. No, if it would be Shabbos, then how come every year it doesn't work out on Shabbos? Only some years. The word is that a leap year is tshuva. A leap year is, the idea of a leap year is tshuva. You're fixing the discrepancy, the disparity between the sun and the moon. Tshuva works like that. Slow, jump. Slow, jump. It's a pneumistic thing. Which means that even when it's not Shabbos, the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't do it for 1 year. The Frierdiker Rebbe did it Larichas Yom V'Shalom Tevis. This year you realize it's 75 years. It's 75th anniversary of the Yom Yom. It's been around for a while. It's a pneumistic thing. It's not just a technical thing. That the union of Shnasa Iber is tshuva. Tshuva, that's what about tshuva is. You make small steps and then you fly. Again and again and again and again. Like the Rebbe said about the Atav HaChatonu. You know this? Remember, my father told me this as a child. The Rebbe, there's 2 nugunim Atav HaChatonu. 1 nigun Atav HaChatonu, you say every word once. Yeah. Then you have Atav HaChatonu. It's 2 nugunim. The Rebbe taught him the same year. I think it was Tashan Chafalev. And the Rebbe said, this is the nigun of Tzaddik and this nigun of Al Tshuva. The Tzaddik goes straight, the Al Tshuva repeats. That's what the Rebbe said. That's why the second part of the nigun never finishes. It's a circle. It's ending. Anyway, but there's one very interesting thing. Pedic Beis is never divided. Pedic Beis is a pretty big Pedic. Pedic Beis is a pretty big Pedic. Pedic Gimel is a small Pedic. Pedic Gimel is half the size of Pedic Beis. Half the size. Pedic Gimel is in 2 parts, and Pedic Beis is always 1. I don't have now Tanya with me, but you have Tanya's, yeah? But that's how the Alter Rebbe made the Shurim. When the Frierdiker Rebbe made the Shurim, he made Pedic Beis always is 1 shiur. It's never 2 shiurim. I'm looking now by a regular year. In both calendars, Pedic Gimel, which is half the size, is divided in 2, and Pedic Beis is never divided. And my hergish is, and that's exactly what hergish means. It's my feeling that Etzem HaNeshama you can't divide. Pedic Beis is about Pintel Yid. There's no division in Paltiel Yid. Perek Gimel is about the tier of the neshama. The tier of the neshama is by definition divided. It's one of those things which, if you pay attention to the Shurim of Chitas, you see that there's a precision. Perek Beis in both years you say in one day. It's a very long shir. Perek Gimel you always say in 2 days. It's a very short shir. Because it's not only about how long or how small the shir is, it's where the division is. Where can you make us psik? Where can you interrupt? In Perek Beis you can't interrupt. You know, like the Rabbi used to say always, that it says in Kisvei Arizal, that when you're saying Dayenu, don't stop. Don't stop. You know why you don't stop? Because the fetish not Dayenu. We want it all. You know, this, whatever, there's a whole bunch of Dayenus. If you give us this, not this Dayenu. But it's not true. We want everything till Bono, Beis Abchira. So you don't stop. You say Dayenu, not... Some people say Dayenu. Dayenu, we'd be happy. Dayenu means it'll be enough. But you don't stop in the middle of Dayenu. So why? You go business up. Because it's behemoth not Dayenu, you understand? So Perek Beis you can't divide. Anyway, Atkan Maimer HaMuzgin. So Perek Beis is describing the neshama as Netzim to Hashem. And like I told you, there's two tziyurim, there's two forms for this. The first is Chelek Elakam Mimal Mamish, that it's a part of Hashem from above, which is a Lashon HaPasuk. Mamish, the word Mamish is not in the Pasuk. The word Mamish is in Alter Rebbe. And the other expression is Yisrael all over Machshava. That Yidden come from the Eibishter's Machshava, which means Chochmah. The difference between the former and the latter is that the former is, and these are my words now, Chassidus, and the latter is how you say it in the signon of Kabbalah. Kabbalah speaks about Svidus. So when you're talking about Chelek HaBimal Mamish, in the language of Kabbalah, as they say in the Rebbe V'yashtel Tzechois, the way it finds itself within the parameters of Seder Ishtalshlus, Chelek Elakam Mimal Mamish is the meaning of Chochmah. And then the Alter Rebbe discusses Chochmah. Yeah, at length. And of course, one of the points of Perek Beis, which is very important, is the interrelatedness of neshamis. We're all connected, but we're not all the same. We're all connected, but some of the head, and some of the eyes, and some of the hands, and some of the feet, and some of the hair, and the skin, and the nails, and so on. So the first idea of the neshama is what the neshama is connection to Hashem is. The middle of the neshama is the form of the neshama, the body of the neshama, so to speak. This is, in effect, the limitations on the neshama. These limitations on the neshama allow the neshama to exist in a world. Infinity and a world are not a shidduch, ever. It's a shidduch. So the infinite neshama, which is described in Perek Beis, is funneled, is presented through limiting forms that allow it to exist in a limited world, and allow it to exist in a world with a space for more than one. If he came here with your infinity, you'd have to have your own planet. There'd be no room for anybody else, because you're infinity and somebody else's infinity. If they'd be exactly the same, you'd be the same person. If they'd be slightly different, you'd burn each other. This is the tzir of the nefesh. It's called seichel and midas and chushim. The mind, the heart, and the senses. They scream. I don't want to use the word muffle. They don't muffle, but they channel the belig v'ol, the neshama, through a koyach. My infinity is speaking reason. My infinity is speaking love. My infinity is speaking determination. My infinity is speaking beauty. My infinity is speaking sweet sound, right? The siriyah, shmiyah, tam, reich, mishush. You have 3 intellectual faculties, you have 6 emotional faculties, you have 7 emotional faculties, and you have 5 senses. They all are mishtamshim knisa v'yitziyah. They all go both ways. We use these tools to bring things from outside of ourselves into ourselves, and we use these things to radiate from what's in us outward. And this is the tzir of the nefesh. This is the body of the soul, so to speak. Then and this took forever. Perek Yom took it forever. Perek Dalet is called the levush, the garments. The garments are tools of the neshama that are not about what the neshama is. They're about how the neshama relates to another. And you have 3 garments. One is called thought, the second is called speech, and the third is called deed. And the way I like to explain it is, you use thought to relate to yourself. You use speech to relate to others like yourself, to other human beings. You can't speak to animals, even though people speak to animals all the time. And you use action to speak to things that are less than you. That means animals and plants and minerals. Machshava dibur ma'aseh. Thought, speech, and action. And the Alter Rebbe said that this is the shleimus of the nefesh. A complete nefesh has an inside, a center, and an outside. The inside, that's a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, The center is its character, its personality, its definition, and the outside, its ability to relate to what's beyond itself, to other people, to other things, and so on and so forth. So we had two classes on this. And what was the essence of what we learned in these two classes? The essence of what we learned in these two classes was that your neshama does only good. When you think of the Varteire, you're thinking with the levush of machshava of your nefesh halakis. If in the middle of your thoughts your mind wanders, you just changed souls. To the human experience, it's seamless. If you're thinking of Varteire, all of a sudden you start thinking paranoia and hatred and and jealousy, yeah? You just flip from one nefesh to the other nefesh. And then when you chapsach 2 pages later and see that your mind has wandered and you come back to the kavanah of tefillah, so you're going back from the nefesh habahamis to the nefesh halakis. In other words, when you say we have two souls, and the second soul is going to be discussed in Perek Vav in chapter 6, which b'pashtus will be a while till we get to, yeah. So when you say we have two souls, and that your godly soul is involved in things that are bittul HaKadosh Baruch Hu, animal souls are involved in anything which is not bittul HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, that's how it works. There's only two. Yeah, bittul, no bittul. There's not an in-between. Bittul is nefesh halakis. Not bittul is nefesh habamis. It's not only true on the level of the essence. It's not even only true on the level of the body. It's true on the level of the expression. The levush ha-machshav, you have two garments of thought, two garments of speech, two garments of action, one from the godly soul and one from the animal soul. And you flip. So if in middle of thinking something, you go back and forth, you're literally changing the shamas. And I would argue it's very tiresome. That's why people with better concentration have an easier time concentrating, because they're not using as much energy. You're jumping from a nefesh to a nefesh. It's like a roller coaster. When you're thinking in Yonim Maliki and using one levush, the garment of the nefesh halakis, when you're thinking in Yonim Behemiyim, you're using literally a different neshama. And you go from one neshama to the other neshama. That's the essence of it. That shleish levushim elu me'ateiro mitzvah. That your oid yashal nefesh misal shleish levushim, of three garments which serve the relationship between the neshama and what's outside of the neshama, and they're distinct to Torah and mitzvahs. Okay? And the Alter Rebbe discussed this, like about a half a page, 3/4 of a page, that you have it beklolus and you have it bepratis. Right? Beklolus means that any time you're doing any mitzvah, you're using the garments of the nefesh halakis. And bepratis means that every single mitzvah is connected to a different part of the person, which is doing in Yonim of Torah mitzvahs. We talked about this in the previous class, which was 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, a month ago, yeah. And then the class before that, okay? Now, in this conversation, the Rebbe also included the koiches, which means that in general, when I'm doing any mitzvah, I'm using the levushim of nefesh halakis, but specifically some mitzvahs are connected to my seichel, and other mitzvahs are connected to my regesh. Some mitzvahs are connected to my mind, and other mitzvahs are connected to my heart. Now the mind and the heart are not the levushim. The mind and the heart are the nefesh itself. But when you're doing mitzvahs, the mind and the heart are involved as well. Okay, you know what? I'm starting from the beginning of the Perek. Perek Dalet. Let's do it again. In addition, there is also to every godly soul shleish levushim, three garments, which are thought, speech, and deed. And the Rebbe says right away, shel taryag mitzvah satayim, of the 630 mitzvah, which means that only when you're doing things in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are you using the levushim of nefesh halakis. When you're doing things which are not in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if they're not bad and they're not treif and they're not awesome, if they're not in the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're not using the levushim of nefesh halakis, you're using the levushim of the nefesh habamis, levushim mesa'abu, what the Rebbe calls them later on. Okay. Says the Rebbe, that when a person fulfills behaviorally in action, call mitzvahs ma'asis, all of the mitzvahs associated with action, ubedibur, and in speech, who asek, he preoccupies himself, he engages, befirush, kol tayag mitzvahs ve'chesein, in understanding the interpretation of the 613 mitzvahs in halachas. In other words, he speaks words of Torah to understand Torah. Ubamachshava, and in his thought, who masig, the translation of the word masig means der gerecht. He reaches intellectually. Kol masha efsha leila hasik, what he is able to reach bepardes hatera, in any one of the four levels of pshat, remes, drush, and seder. So when you do mitzvahs and you say halachas and you understand Torah in your thought, harei, this condition, this circumstance affects that klolus, taryag, eginafshi, all 613 of the limbs of the person, milubashim, are manifest. B'tayag mitzvah satera, the 630 mitzvah. In other words, the klolus, I don't know if you remember the class, doesn't matter what you're doing. One of the differences between kedusha and klipa is that in klipa everything is separate. Separate. Pirud, nifrad. And in kedusha everything is connected. Everything has a place. Ein lach davish, ein lemok. Everything has its own place. But at the same time, even though everything has its own place, it's very, very connected. Let's just give you the example from the introduction to today's shir. Yeah, you have the inner part of the neshama, the central part of the neshama, the outer part of the neshama. Yeah, the nefesh habam is the animal soul, has the same design, an inside, the middle, and an outside. There's a difference. That in kedusha they're connected. When the simplest Jew does the simplest mitzvah, that's connected to his previous, to his essence. Now, how conscious it is a different question. But in kedusha, everything is connected, and therefore the same thing is true here. It doesn't matter what mitzvah Yid is doing. Whatever mitzvah Yid is doing, whether he's doing it b'machshava, or he's doing it b'dibur, or he's doing it b'maisa, the whole person on all three levels of machshava, dibur, and maisa are involved in elikus. That's such klolus. I'm doing one mitzvah using my right hand, but because it's kedusha, so even though I'm using one part of my body and one levush, the levush of asiyah, to do a mitzvah, but because in kedusha there's no separations, the whole person, all the ramachevidim of the person, all of the different garments, thoughts, speech, and action are involved in all of Yiddishkeit. You understand? All of Yiddishkeit is in this mitzvah. The Rebbe has an idea which we learn in yeshivas, yeah, that it says ha'oisech b'mitzvah patur min ha'mitzvah. Someone who's doing a mitzvah is potter from another mitzvah. Ha'oisech b'mitzvah patur mitzvah. If you're doing one mitzvah, you're potter from another mitzvah. So in Chassidus, so up in Igle, up in Pashas, the halacha, what does that mean? That you can't do two things at once. It's impossible. So the Eibusha says to you, you're busy doing a mitzvah which is more important, I exempt you from mitzvah which is less important. For example, if you're busy raising money for Pidyon Shvuyim to save a life, and it's man Krishma, and Krishma is a very important mitzvah, it's Achdas Hashem, it's Mesidas Nefesh, it's a whole bunch of very important things, and they tell you, don't stop raising money for Pidyon Shvuyim to say Krishma. What about, so say, continue raising money for Pidyon Shvuyim. What about Achdas Hashem? The answer is, you're doing one mitzvah, automatically you can't do all of the rest. That's how it says in Chassidus. Or, if you go to Lavaya Lahavdul, this is a Mishnah in Brachas, it's not so realistic, but the Mishnah describes it. You go to a Lavaya and you're in the front row, and the Avelim can see you, and the Giyaz man Akhtfilas, man Krishma comes, and if you're going to step out of line to say Krishma, it'll be embarrassment to the Avelim, and so on and so forth. So you say no Krishma. Why? And Nicham Avelim is not even a Deiraisa. The Rebbe once said, yeah? Menachem Avol is not a Deiraisa, but V'hav Belech Kamoicha is. And when you're Menachem Avol, you become the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. It says in Halacha, the Rebbe spoke about this when he came back from the Rebbetzins Levaya. It says in Halacha, you're not supposed to be Menachem Avol till the third day. The Rebbe says, but the fact is, people are Menachem Avol right away. So the answer is, because the first 2 days, it's not Nicham Avol, it's Avos Yisrael. And Avos Yisrael always, days. The third day, it's already Nicham Avol. The first day, it's Poshtav V'yahav L'Lecha Kamoy. So you're oisik, but mitzvah, potem and a mitzvah. Why? Because in Kedusha there's no separations. And because in Kedusha there's no separations, whatever mitzvah I'm doing all the mitzvahs. That's the meaning of these words. Had a klolus, taryag evrei nafshei, milubashe, betayag mitzvah. All of me is involved in all of Yiddishkeit. I'm doing one mitzvah with one piece of me. Paltiel says no. Klolus, taryag evrei nafshei, milubashe, betayag mitzvah. This is the first point, and this we talked about at length. Then comes Uba Pratius, but when you break it down, the more specifics, every mitzvah is connected to a different part of a person. In other words, there's Ramach Evidim, there's 248 limbs. A young man, friend sent me recently an email, a text, a question. what's the source of Shasar Gidim and what are the Shasar Gidim? It's a really good question. The Ramach Eiverim, the 248 limbs, are listed specifically, in detail, in Mishnayos Olis, in Mishnayos, Seder Taris. You know exactly what the Ramach Eiverim are. He counts them one by one. And a woman has Reish Nun Aleph. As you know, a woman has 3 more, 251. I don't know what they are, but there's the Metzias. That's why when you say a Misha Beirach for a man, you say Lamach Eivareh, for a woman you say B'chol Eivareh V'gideh, because a woman has Reish Nun Aleph, 251, I think. Okay. But what else? How many nerves do you have? How many veins do you have? And which ones are they? Are they the veins that carry blood? Are they the veins that carry communication, the neurological veins? What's the cheshbon of somebody asked me. So I didn't know. So what do you mean you don't know? You don't say I don't know, you deflect. So I showed him that when the Rambam counts the mitzvahs, and in the Gemara, he doesn't say that there's Ramach mitzvahs aseh against Ramach Ivorim. And Shasa mitzvahs laces against Shasa Gidim. That's what it says in Rambam. The Rambam says Ramach mitzvah against Ramach Ivorim. And Shasa Gidim, Kiminyan Shnei Sachama. The 365 mitzvahs leisa go against the days of the solar year. But Shasar Gidim is in Zoyer. So I first gave him other information, so I shouldn't like I don't know anything, and then at the bottom of the page I wrote, and I don't know. After I distracted and deflected and did that go. I've never seen it. And my not seeing it doesn't mean a thing. But I did some looking. It means the Alter Rebbe and Tanya uses the word Shasar Gidim all the time. So whatever the case is. Anyway, so even though in general, whatever mitzvah you're doing, all of you is involved in Elokus, specifically every mitzvah is into a particular even. If you remember the class that I gave you a month ago, I discussed with you the idea that a Yid came, remember I told you the story, Yid came to the Rebbe, he had a problem with his head, and the Rebbe told him to take on the mitzvah of Hashgacha Pratis. It is a sefer called Sefer Charedim. Sefer Charedim does not have all Tayag mitzvahs, but he has a few hundred, 200 and change, I think. And he shows you which mitzvah is connected to which part of the body. And when a person is ill, so one option is to learn the part of Teda connected to that limb. Another option is to strengthen that mitzvah which is connected to that part of the body. It says in Sforim, this idea. So this is what the B'prati is. Ubepratius, and specifically, Bechinas Chabad Shebenavshei, even though all of the person is involved, all of Yiddishkeit, but specifically the mind or the brain of the person. Miluboshes Bahasagas HaTeira is involved in understanding Teira, reaching Teira intellectually. Shumasik, that one reaches Bepardis in any of the 4 levels, Pshat Terem and Drush Seid. Based on your intellectual reach, in other words, the seichel that you have, and the neshama that you have, these are 2 different things. We work based on what we called them later in Tanya, earlier and later, levushim and koiches. We have certain neshama faculties that are complicated, that are qualified by our biological faculties, and the combination makes us who we are. So there is how much I can understand based on what I am, plus what kind of neshama I have. The hamidis and the emotions, shehein, yira, va'ava, v'anfei, and their fear, love, and their branches and their offspring, muluboshes, they are invested, b'kiyum hamitzvahs b'maise ubedibah, which is in the fulfillment of mitzvahs, whether they're mitzvahs connected to action or they're mitzvahs connected to speech, and included in speech, it's shu talmateda shekeneged kulam, which includes also limadateda. Now, this is really not the second thing, but the third thing. This is not the second thing, and it's the third thing, and I'll tell you how. The first idea is that whatever mitzvah I'm doing, all of me is involved in all mitzvahs. That's the first thing. The second idea is that every one of the mitzvahs is connected to a different part of me, which was the conversation we had 4 weeks ago. Every mitzvah is a different limb, and you have to know which limb each mitzvah is. This is already a third idea. What's the third idea? The third idea is that, I probably told this to you, but I guess I have to repeat it. The third idea would be the following. If you look in the Mishnah, in Ohalis, that lists the Ramach Eiverim, you will notice some startling lacks, some surprising not included There's 248 limbs, yeah? That does not include the brain, doesn't include the eyes, doesn't include the heart, doesn't include the lungs, doesn't include the kidneys, doesn't include the liver, doesn't include the spleen, doesn't include the intestines, doesn't include all the things that we can't live without. Did you know that? I told you that before, I'm sure. Yeah. And this is what the Sefer Yitzhak talks about. Sefer Yitzhak does not talk about the Eivarim, it talks about the Eivarim. Why? Because Apiteira and Eivid has to have a bone. The brain doesn't have any bones, the eye doesn't have any bones, the heart doesn't have any, they're muscles. So these are plenius, you understand? These are above the Ramachim. In other words, our understanding of how Torah understands what a person is partial. We get stuck. We don't have the full picture. We don't have the whole picture. But when you understand the full picture, there's 248 mitzvahs. And the 248 mitzvahs correspond to 248 limbs. That's true. But then there's something deeper. You understand? So what I did last time was I spoke to you the bepratus. Bepratus means every mitzvah is connected to a particular limb. This is already a third idea. That besides for the fact that the mitzvahs that I do, each mitzvah is connected to a particular limb, each mitzvah that I do is connected to what's deeper than the limbs. You understand? One mitzvah is my right hand, one mitzvah is my left hand, one mitzvah is my right foot. But deeper than the mitzvahs are the Eivarim Pnimiyim. And I like to separate them in English by using the word organ versus the word limb. It's just my choice of words. I don't know if this is accurate. There's limbs. A limb is a bone, basa gidevatzam, is skin and bone and ligaments that connect them, or veins, whatever they are. And the organs have no bones. That's the Eivarim Pnimiyim. So after the Alter Rebbe says, B'klolus, whatever you do in Yiddishkeit, you're doing it all. And Bepratyus, there's a third idea. The third idea is that the pnimiyus of the mitzvahs that we do are the Eivarim Pnimiyim. And again, the Hasbara Shebedava, the Reichkeit Shebedava would be the following idea. And again, I'm going to have to stop now because we know that there are things that are not mitzvahs. I talked about this last time, I'm sure. That we know the things that are not mitzvahs. Not mitzvahs. According to certain opinions, davening is not a mitzvah. Tefillah is such an opinion. According to certain opinions, tshuva is not a mitzvah. Tshuva is not a mitzvah. According to certain opinions, v'yahavta l'reach hakamoicha is not a mitzvah. Yeah? And you can go on. According to certain opinions, emunah is not a mitzvah. Emunah is not a mitzvah. So what does it mean? They don't matter. They don't matter. Saying that emunah and tefillah and tshuva, what was the fourth one I said? And Ahavas Yisrael are not mitzvahs, is saying that a human being is 248 limbs, he doesn't have to have a brain, he doesn't have to have a heart, he doesn't have to have a soul. So there's a letter from Alter Rebbe, and again I talked about this last time as well, where the Alter Rebbe says there are many things that are not mitzvahs, so it's not because they're not deiraisa. Listen, the Misnagdim was saying davening is not so important. Why? There are opinions that it's not a deiraisa. So the answer is emunah is not important. It's not a mitzvah either. The mitzvah is to know Hashem. And that's what the brain is. That's what the heart is. That's what the lungs are. That's what the Eivarim Pnimiyim are. They're not specific mitzvahs connected to specific organs, specific limbs. They are the whole of Yiddishkeit. You understand? In English, when I teach this, I call them super mitzvahs. And one is not a mitzvah. It's more than a mitzvah. It's the whole religion. Tefillah is not a mitzvah. It's the connection between the Jew and God. Tshuva is not a mitzvah. It's the essence of Yiddishkeit. And the same goes all the different things that go into this category, and they're connected. I don't know what, to the brain and to the heart and to the kidney and to the spleen and to the lungs and to the liver and to the intestines. And you look in the Sefer Yetzirah, he explains how the Chav Beis Yossi are connected to all of these Eivarim Pnimiyim. And Rechem Tois, he counts. There's 22 Hebrew letters, and he tells you how each one of the Hebrew letters, none of them are connected to the limbs, but they're connected to the organs. This is the Pnimius, you understand? This is the Neshama of the Tarag mitzvahs, the Ramach mitzvahs. So first the Alter Rebbe spoke B'klolus, then he speaks Bepratyus, and then he says, wait, there's a third dimension. And the third dimension is that you're doing a mitzvah which is a limb. It's a behavioral act with meat and bones and ligaments. Yeah, let's use those words. Behind that is your brain and your heart. In other words, behind that is your neshama. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is now saying, right? Bechines. So when I read the word bepratus with you last time, for those who don't know, bepratus is 7 lines from the top, When I read one word and I give you a whole speech. And I told you that although the Alter Rebbe doesn't say it, this is what the Alter Rebbe means, that each mitzvah is connected to a different limb. Now comes number 3. And the number 3 is that in addition to the mitzvahs being connected to an individual limb, there is the pnimius of the mitzvahs. The pnimius of the mitzvahs is the neshama itself. Okay, and we'll stop now. Okay?